Gosh, so the Colts quarterback situation, it's just one of these things that makes it great to be a fan, of course, of the Indianapolis Colts, but really as a fan of the NFL as a whole, right? Like, this has just been a remarkable story, and I personally feel it's going to be one of those things that's kind of referenced for years to come, the way this thing went down, and what a difference that a day makes, or in this case, for the Colts, I guess, what a difference, I don't know, 6 months makes for this team, and to even appreciate how remarkable it is, what we're seeing, and I think we all appreciate it. But in the case that you don't, you have to kind of do a quick refresher of the timeline, right? You have to kind of understand the circumstances that led to this point to really prop up just how great this story is. The Colts come into the offseason following what was an incredibly challenging year for their young quarterback, their franchise quarterback, the quarterback of the future, Anthony Richardson. They sign a guy by the name of Daniel Jones to be a level of competition for him that is ultimately supposed to elevate him. At least that's the story we're being told, right? In large part, the narrative that was being painted about the Daniel Jones signing in regard to Anthony Richardson was essentially that if you're Anthony Richardson and you can't beat out Daniel Jones, you ain't got no shot of being a franchise quarterback for any team, right? And that in many ways was an insult to Daniel Jones, because what that's really saying is Daniel Jones stinks so bad that if you can't beat him out, you're even worse, right? Like, that's ultimately the story that's trying to be told when you say something like that. So fast forward to OTAs, of course, as he should, Anthony Richardson gets the first crack at the starting job. There's no pads, no contact. And Richardson, before anything has really even happened, before you've even made it to training camp, gets soreness in his throwing shoulder, the same shoulder, by the way, which was surgically repaired, really for the sole purpose, we were told at the time of the surgery, for it not being a lingering issue. So we get the news that he's going to miss all of OTAs, and then the fan base goes absolutely berserk, right? And then I come here and I make a very straightforward statement about Anthony Richardson. I say, you can mark this day, the day it is that he got that injury and we got that news, as the day that the Anthony Richardson experiment ended for the Indianapolis Colts. And what it came down in that moment for me was very, very simple. It was that he could not be trusted to be the starting quarterback of your team, period. And if you're Shane Steichen and if you're Chris Ballard, your job's on the line coming into the season. The reason you brought in Daniel Jones ultimately was due to a lack of trust that you were developing in Anthony Richardson, right? You were starting to see some signs of, hey, we might have missed on this pick. And here come the injuries again, before, again, we've even gotten to training camp, right? Well, then we get the news that he's going to be fine for camp. And as fans, we sort of forget all of that because we want him to be the franchise guy so bad. Like, as Colts fans, ever since the Andrew Luck retirement, we had been waiting so long, right? We had suffered with the quarterback situation as fans of this team. So training camp comes along. We end up in a joint practice with Anthony Richardson. He has a day. The offense does whatever it wants. And then, boom, we're back. We're like Al Pacino, right? Just when we thought we were out, they pull us back in. That's the situation we were in with Anthony Richardson. We were emotionally invested in him, right? The number 4 overall pick. And again, as I said, we'd suffered, right? So we were emotionally invested. Of course, the organization was invested in the stance that they took him in the top 5. So we're looking and saying, okay, well, that doesn't last long, right? Because we go into a real preseason game against the Baltimore Ravens, and I think the Ravens in some part kind of saw all the talk about that practice, where essentially saying they got punked, and they're looking and saying, we're not going to have that. And they go out there, and I forget who it was on the Ravens. He laid a lick on Anthony Richardson, a hit that would have put down a small mule, okay? And his Richardson, that's insane. His pinky ends up dislocated, pointing. His pinky ends up in Kentucky or Cincinnati, Ohio. All right, we still don't know what happened to Anthony Richardson's pinky since that day. Point being, this was something. It wasn't the injury in of itself. Of course, the injury was frustrating because that had been the MO with Anthony Richardson. But what was the most frustrating part about that is Shane Steichen talks about the operation. Well, that's something that would not have happened had he been able to identify that pre-snap and either adjusted the protection or gotten the ball out quicker than he did. He didn't even see that guy coming. So at that point, in the face of overwhelming evidence that Richardson perhaps could not be trusted to be your quarterback, the Colts go with Daniel Jones. And the fan base, once again, goes absolutely berserk. They lose their mind after all it is that we just saw, despite the fact that Anthony Richardson was just, I mean, the pain we were experiencing rooting for Anthony Richardson was very, very real. And of course, now we are where we are, right? We're 5-1, the number one seed in the AFC. Daniel Jones, in many ways, obviously, has made everybody eat crow. Maybe me a little bit less so, but I didn't quite expect what we're seeing right now. I saw a path to success, but what he's done has been absolutely terrific. And it just marks really another lesson for us as fans that we should not forget anytime soon, because it's not even like this story is the only example of this. It happens every single year in the league that something unexpected like this happens. And those who have been here a while have heard me say this. You've heard me take this stance. And those of you, maybe some of you rather, may be hearing it for the first time. And it's very, very simple the way I view this. The NFL, just when you think you've seen it all, just when you think you know everything about this league, I'm 28 now, and I have plenty to learn about football in the NFL, but I've been watching as a diehard since I'm like 5, 6, 7 years old. You're talking over 20 years of being a diehard fan of the NFL. Just when you think you know what you're talking about, this league has a way of reminding you that you have no damn clue what it is that's going to happen, which is why always when I am analyzing a situation, I try to make sure to view both sides, even if one of them seems unlikely, per the view of kind of the overall consensus, because not only is what I just said true, but also the consensus so often is driven by this herd mentality, kind of an emotional response. And then that emotional response gets presented as a fact. And even worse, if you disagree, if you come in and try to bring a level of nuance, people make it like you're the problem, that you are somehow taking away from this discussion, as opposed to the opposite, which is really trying to add to it, right? I mean, raise your hand if you've been in that spot before, where you're looking and saying, I feel like I am so clearly right now, yet everyone disagrees. And it's almost like you're being gaslit when you're just trying to be objective in the way you're viewing things. So, for those of you who find yourself in a spot right now where you were so dead wrong about this quarterback situation and found yourself shaming others for it because everyone thought this way, so of course that had to be true, allow me to give you a little lesson that I've learned over the years. If everyone is viewing a situation one way, you're wise to at least examine the other side of that situation. And when you do that, you'd be surprised how often that side, the side that not everyone agrees with, is actually the right side of things, or at a minimum, how often the truth is usually somewhere in between the consensus and the less popular view. So when I say that I've never been wrong about the Indianapolis Colts in my entire life, which is true, I've never been wrong about this team. That's my secret. It's not that I'm smart. In fact, I in many ways am a complete idiot, right? But one thing I can do, and anyone can do, like you don't have to be a genius to do it, is I make an effort to remove my emotion when I'm coming to a conclusion about something, particularly about this team. Now, I may react emotionally to a situation, but ultimately, when I actually get to what it is that I believe is the truth, how it is that we should be viewing this situation in a macro perspective, I've removed the emotion from that part of it, right? So, all of that to bring us to the topic of the show, which is Daniel Jones. And there's talk about a contract extension. There's talk about him being the MVP of this league, at least amongst us, the fans. And the last time I sat here, I was saying essentially that I'm certain that number 17, the guy behind center that I'm looking at, this version of Daniel Jones, that this guy is the franchise quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts. I'm certain of it. Yet, when you talk about making a contract extension happen right now, when you talk about the MVP conversation, I say no to both of those for Daniel Jones. How can that be true? Well, we're going to talk about that after first quickly talking about the injury report here early in the week, because, of course, that is what it is that we have to do. We have to cover the team, right? We can't just have conversations that have nothing to do with the current events. And there's a few notable names on that injury report, so we'll get into that. But before we do, you know what it is? I got to introduce the show. My name is Justin. This right here is the Ride in the Bench Colts podcast. As always, ask anyone watching and enjoying the show. Go ahead, shoot a like. It's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Of course, subscribe. If you want to be a part of the journey, we're on our way to 4,000 subscribers. I've been saying it a while. We're like, I don't even know, 50, 70 subscribers away, something like that. We're right there. So if you keep coming back, enjoying the show, perhaps it's your first day here and you appreciated the little lesson I just taught you, hit that subscribe button. Help me get there. Never miss an episode again. Of course, audio listeners, leave a five-star review. Let the people know how much you're enjoying the show, but most importantly, be civil in the comments section. You don't know what the person on the other side of the keyboard is going through today. Ultimately, we're all rooting for the same thing, right? It's the Indianapolis Colts. So even if we may disagree, the intentions are pure. We're all trying to, for the betterment of this team. For the shoe, we bleed blue. That's what we're here doing. We're just trying to further the discussion. That's what we do here. So now that we have all of that out of the way, let's get back to business. And I'm going to pull up the injury report real quickly and just kind of speak to that before kind of getting back into the meat of the discussion. So right now, as of yesterday, as of Wednesday, we'll see kind of how this stuff progresses throughout the week. You had Josh Downs, which was really the most surprising one, right? Where he's now in the concussion protocol. He didn't practice. Ashton Dulin with some sort of chest injury did not practice, but we didn't hear much about that during the game. I think he played the whole game. So we'll see if he's able to log some limited practices throughout the week. Tyler Goodson, still with the groin. Tyler Groinson did not practice. Kenny Moore with the Achilles logged a limited practice. I don't think it was in any team activities. I think he was doing his own thing, but I also wasn't there. So don't quote me on that. But we'll see how that progresses as the week goes on. Alec Pierce logged with an ankle, but he had a full practice, so he'll be just fine. Braden Smith with a rest day. Charvarius Ward, once again, his second concussion of the season. He's in the protocol. I wouldn't expect him to play Sunday. Kenny Moore, we'll see. And Josh Downs, I also would not expect to play Sunday because it's very rare. I don't have any numbers to back this up. Like, I don't have evidence. It's just anecdotally observing the league. Very rarely does a guy come in with concussion symptoms to a week of practice and then play that Sunday. I feel like with concussions, you're basically guaranteed to miss a game, right? And Josh Downs, obviously, that's a big loss for the Indianapolis Colts offensively. I almost would dare say, and it's not to make a statement that one's better than the other, but when you talk about the way the offense functions, you'd almost be better off without Michael Pittman Jr. for a week in some senses because you have guys that are kind of more fit to play that Pittman role. Like a guy like Ashton Dulin can come in and bring a lot of the same things that Michael Pittman brings, even if he doesn't do it at as high of a level as a receiver. An Alec Pierce, of course, can fill in for some of what he does. But ultimately, Josh Downs is a one-of-one talent on this offense, and it's part of what makes him so valuable and part of what makes him so great and really one of the overlooked receivers in this league. So the question then becomes who fills in for him. Obviously, A.D. Mitchell is a guy who's in the doghouse right now and has been inactive for a couple weeks. And Anthony Gould would be your other guy, right? Who's really relegated as a return man, and he does a great job at that. And he has served as their backup slot receiver for really all of this, season from OTAs, preseason, training camp into the season. So the question does kind of become for the Colts, which receiver gets a bump, A.D. Mitchell or Anthony Gould? I kind of think it will be Anthony Gould primarily because if all the other receivers are active at the end of the day, Gould is your return man, so he's going to be active anyway. It's not like you have to make him an active member of the roster after being an inactive player. I think he'd probably be the guy they would give a chance, but you don't exactly know. And one thing we did see from Anthony Gould in preseason, at least in my opinion, I thought the hand's a little suspect. I think he's a playmaker. I think with the ball in his hands, he could do some good things, but you got to catch the ball consistently. So we'll see how that progresses. But Josh Downs, I don't expect to play. Kenny Moore, that's encouraging. Charvarius Ward, that's not. Really the big thing with the Colts in the secondary is, they're 5-1 right now. And a lot of people talking about trading for a corner. For me, it's just about getting these guys on the field, right, together. Jalen Jones, still nothing on him, right? He's just a hamstring and on IR. We haven't heard anything about Jalen Jones, but this team has a bye week in week 11. You do wonder if they're just able to stay in a good place, which they would have to be, even if they lost all the way into the bye week. I think they would be, what's the math, 5-3 or something like that, 5-4. Either way, you wonder, can you get all of these guys in Jalen Jones, Kenny Moore, and Charvarius Ward on the field at the same time for like a month going into the end of the season? I think if you can do that, you're going to be in a real good place if you happen to make it into the playoffs, because that, of course, will have been kind of a harder part of your schedule. And then you'll have your best guys in the secondary finally together at the right time. I think that ultimately, and this is maybe wishful thinking, I think that's what ends up happening for the Indianapolis Colts is you find a way to get a month of action towards the back end of the season where all of your top three corners are in, and then kind of all these talks about the secondary being bad sort of dissipate. Because remember, this was a strength of the Indianapolis Colts coming into the season, this secondary. They kind of flipped that thing around, and the injuries have just kind of ravaged that unit and kind of continue to do so. So that's the practice report for now, the injury report, and we'll see how it progresses as the week goes on. Don't want to really talk about too much implications because you don't know Thursday, Friday, what happens and kind of ultimately into the game against the Chargers, who's going to play and who's not. So with all of that, let's get back into Daniel Jones and let's talk about that extension. So this extension, much like what I spoke about at the top of the show, the idea of signing him right now to an extension is an emotional, a reactionary thing to do at this particular moment for the Colts. And if you personally have ever handled money, right, whether you're kind of out and about drinking and going out to party and whatever it is, or you're gambling or investing, anything like that, you know damn well once you mix up your emotions and your money, you're going to run into trouble. That's just the reality of your financial management, right? That's what goes into it. And when you look at the Colts right now, again, as I said, 5-1, not even halfway through the season. As I said moments ago, the hardest part of the schedule still not even here yet. You haven't even versed the Texans or the Jaguars yet. That's going to come after the Week 11 bye. So you don't even know the result of the division yet. We don't know how Jones will do in the playoffs. Hell, if I'm to be even more pessimistic, you technically don't even know if you're going to make the playoffs yet. We'd like to believe we will, but crazier things have happened, right? Just when you think you know, the league has a way to remind you. You look at Sam Darnold last year for the Vikings. They went, what, 13-4, something like that? All of a sudden, they make themselves into the playoffs. Darnold played at an MVP level for a large part of the season. He goes into the playoffs and shits the bed like an old man with dementia in a retirement home, right? And that's no disrespect, by the way, to Sam Darnold. But what happened in that playoff game. And he lost himself an extension, right? All of that season, a great season, in one day. Not that he lost, by the way. You could have accepted a loss. But the way he played, he lost himself an extension in one day. And the reality here is that if you're the Colts and you're Daniel Jones, you agreed to a contract, right? Daniel Jones agreed to the terms. He signed his name on the paper. So there's no foul play in waiting here. I know some people kind of take the stance of like, you got to pay your guys if they're playing well. They've agreed to a contract. That's how it goes. And you negotiate the raise when the time comes. Like that's how a job works, right? Like that's just what it is. So it's only right that if you're the Colts, and really if you're Daniel Jones, right? Because I assume that Daniel Jones is loving it in Indianapolis right now. I assume he pictures himself, I mean, he lives at the Colts practice facility right now. He just does. But with that said, if you're Daniel Jones, one, if you're the Colts, of course it's wise to wait for all the reasons I just said. But if you're Daniel Jones, if you continue playing like this, you're putting yourself financially at a disadvantage to sign right now. I mean, you're going to be worth more money in the month of January. You're going to be worth more in January 2026 than you are right now in October of 2025 if you keep doing this. And that's just the reality of the situation. So wise for all parties to wait. And ultimately, that's why I don't think you're going to hear even any murmurs of this happening anytime soon. It's just not what it is. Now, ultimately, I do expect it to happen, primarily because, again, I'm quite certain that Daniel Jones is that guy. Now, on to the MVP discussion for Daniel Jones. Ultimately, me saying he does not deserve the MVP, and deserves the wrong word. Ultimately, I don't think he's the best choice for MVP of this league. Really comes down to what I feel is the definition of the award. In fact, what is the definition of the award? Which is the most. A lot of people are just like, this just turns into you had a great season, you win the MVP. No, what it is you are the most valuable player to your team's success comparatively to the rest of the league. Now, to be fair to Daniel Jones, if I'm to kind of make the case for him, when you look at the Colts this year versus last year, there is no doubt, even though you've made some great additions to this team, and they have, the one piece added that made the single most impact, the biggest difference for this team, and the reason you're seeing them play like they are right now, the guy that ultimately put this team over the top, it is Daniel Jones. So in that case, he's very much, the Colts MVP in that regard. But when you look around the league, right, because this is a league-wide award, the question becomes, are there other guys who are even more valuable to their team's success than Daniel Jones is. And when you examine that very quickly, you're able to say yes to that question without all that much argument, right? I mean, Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Patrick Mahomes, Baker, maybe not in some capacity. Of course, he's playing great, but there's talent on that team, although the injuries, obviously, to that wide receiver room have been very, very real, and he's clearly elevating that offense beyond what it is that you would typically expect from them in those circumstances. Josh Allen, another guy, he doesn't have a single wide receiver in that room, in my opinion, that's better than either Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, or Josh Downs, right? Like, I think each one of those guys would go there and be the best receiver on that team. Mahomes has also dealt with injuries at the wide receiver position. The running back position in Kansas City has been brutal this season. And by the way, before you say the Chiefs are just 3-3, he can't be the MVP, just wait. I mean, my goodness. Obviously, the win over the Lions, but even before that, you'd have to have been crazy to have discounted that team. I think the Chiefs, unfortunately, right now, who have kind of become the new Patriots in some sense, where I'm just getting tired of watching them succeed. You might have the best version of the Chiefs this year than you've seen in the past couple of years, right? But that's, obviously this is a Colts show. So back to the Colts. When you compare Daniel Jones' situation to both of those guys, there is a case to be made that the Colts right now have the most complete offense in the entire NFL from a talent perspective. And it's not like you look at the Colts and say they would be bottom feeders without him. Like, even last year, in a season that was tumultuous to say the least, you come out of that thing 8-9 with a quarterback not even completing 50% of his passes, right? So as good as they are with Daniel Jones, I just don't think when you look at the whole league, you can say he's the most valuable player to his team's success. Hell, if you're looking at the Colts, and this is no slight on Daniel Jones, just the truth, you can argue, in fact, it's likely true, that offense, even if Daniel Jones fits perfectly within it, really runs through Jonathan Taylor. You can make the case that Jonathan Taylor is the most important piece to that offense, right? So that's kind of where it comes from an MVP perspective. Of course, I would love Jones to win it, but when you look at awards for him, he's the shoo-in to win Comeback Player of the Year, which, by the way, was like plus 1,000 coming into the season, which seemed like kind of in hindsight like a gimme of a bet, but that's neither here nor there. So that's my take on the Colts quarterback position. It's an amazing story that Colts fans should appreciate because it's just one of these things that reminds you why this league is as great as it is. They say any given Sunday for a reason, but also it's any given season as a result of that, right? And that's what you're seeing with the Indianapolis Colts right now. And that was an episode. This right here is the Ride the Bench Colts podcast. And as always, go Colts.